So we've all dealt with a client in the past who would ask for a number of revisions and make it so impossible to finish a project that it became frustrating for the client and the freelancer as well. In this video, I'm going to answer this specific point so that the next time you deal with the situation, you know exactly what to do. The first point that I want to mention over here is that make sure before even signing the contract, you have this conversation. The problem is, and what happens a lot of times, is that we don't expect the client. We think that, you know what, during the conversation, they're so polite and gentle and so easygoing that we're like, you know what, they're probably not going to ask for revisions. They're so laid back. And all of a sudden we get hit with the surprise afterwards when we find out that they're so specific and picky on what they want and don't want. So rather than having the surprise afterwards when the project has been signed and is on the go, make sure you have this conversation in the first process before you sign the project. And the second point over here, which carries on the first point, is that when you have that conversation, make sure it's a specific conversation. Don't leave it vague. So when you talk about revisions and what will happen, make it clear and say, hey, you know what? There's going to be 5 revisions. This is the number of revisions that can occur. The first revision will happen after this phase of the project. The second revision is going to happen after this phase of the project. And make it very clear cut that by doing this, the project will finish at the time that is required. Any other revisions will delay the project by X amount of days. Once you have very specific and clear-cut understanding of what will happen, then the client and the freelancer know that tomorrow there's no misunderstanding. It is what it is. And then anytime a question comes up about revisions, you can refer back to the same text that you sent in the Upwork chat stating what exactly is supposed to happen in these scenarios. So make sure that it is specific so you avoid any ambiguities tomorrow when the client's like, wait, I thought you meant this about the revisions, and someone else is going to say you meant this about the revisions. Make it clear cut. Third point is that, and this is something that I stress on a lot as well, is attempt to understand the reason for the pickiness. When you're having that conversation with a client, try to understand what their nature is. Are there someone who's very specific on maybe the color palette, or they're very specific on grammar, or maybe they're very specific on a certain element of design or something else? Whatever that is, attempt to understand that in advance. If you know that they're very specific and picky on a specific thing, then you can address that immediately, or maybe exercise more caution. So maybe you're doing some content writing and they're very specific on the choice of words. You can run that by them first and just say, hey, by the way, I wrote this and I kind of use this phrase over here. What are your thoughts on that? By having them involved in the beginning and having them involved in the spot where you know they're the most pickiest, you avoid the headache afterwards of them trying to rewrite everything, or maybe you're doing a graphic, or maybe whatever field you're in, that they're trying to redo a lot of it or ask for revisions. The fourth point over here that I recommend is that when you're in the preliminary process attempting to decide if this client is the one or not, factor in the revisions in your price. So make sure that tomorrow, if you realize that this person is very specific, they're very specific in what they want, make sure you factor that into the price so that you're not caught off guard tomorrow. The worst thing that you can do is that give them an exact price. You find out that they're being very specific in what they want, and all of a sudden, where you felt you had a nice margin in terms of your time and the profit that you'd get out of this, instead dwindle significantly because you realize that you're spending so much more time now, and that time is taking away from your other personal obligations, applying for other jobs on Upwork, or even doing other client work. So make sure you factor that in based on the individual case-by-case scenario. And the last point over here, and something that I've done as well, is that create a template that you have for yourself that you can use for clients in general. So for example, myself personally, what I do is I allow for unlimited revisions. So the client does not feel that, they're capping me off at 3 or 5. And sometimes clients get a little bit weary of that because, they're like, if I go with this freelancer, they're gonna, cap me off over here, and then, I'm gonna have a problem afterwards. So I don't want that headache afterwards, and I don't want a client to lose a client in that scenario. So what I do is I say that, hey, listen, I'm gonna give you unlimited revisions. However, once the first draft of the work that I'm doing is completed, we're gonna go through it together. By doing that, I know exactly what the client wants. He knows the type of person that I am in terms of the work that I do. And once we get that understanding that this first draft is up to the standard that it needs to be, then I can replicate that model for the rest of them. And then I know for a fact that, even if I allow them unlimited revisions, because I've gotten their blessings and their satisfaction from the first draft, I know they're not going to go back afterwards and be picky about certain things. That's something that's worked for me based on my own personality and what I've done. But again, the point that I'm going to give over here is develop a template that you feel based on your industry, based on the clients that you get, and your personality itself of what you can handle. That's everything for now, guys. I hope this helps you next time you're in a sticky situation like this. If you like what you see, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and I look forward to seeing you guys again.